Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's me Prakriti Timilsina. As a programmer journey beginner, I was always confused what should I begin with, and I always wonder which programming language will take me to the right path. So to remove dilemma that every programmer beginner have, I have come here with a video to give information about programming language. So we will get to know about programming language by one of the best programmer, Danny Mace. He started his journey at IBM as a programmer and now he is vice president at one of the part of the IBM company. So let's listen to him and let's welcome him to our Dynamic PT family. And I would like to thank Danny Mace for giving his precious time to give us information about programming language. His time and effort will be appreciated. So here comes our one of the best and kind programmer, Danny Mace. Welcome.
Hey Selena, it's Danny. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on your channel about the importance of computer programming languages and the impacts that they've had in our world. I'm a programmer myself. I started when I was around 15 years old, and I've built my whole career working for the last 30 years, working with programming languages and programming. And I consider myself a lifelong programmer around that. So it's a particular interest of mine. If we talk about the impact that languages have had on people and computers, really it's a good place to start understanding what programming languages are for. Originally, computers speak in numbers, like a calculator. They speak ones and zeros and a sequence of those in long strings. And us humans like to speak in natural languages, like Nepalese or English for me. And programming languages help bridge those two different language styles between computers with numbers and humans with human language, natural languages we call it. Let's talk about the earliest computer languages back from the 1950s. Originally, computers focused on scientific programming primarily, and they used languages such as assembly language or Fortran or COBOL. Those were the really big first three computer languages in use. On the assembly language, it was really a basic language that had very rudimentary capabilities and helped developers to be slightly more productive. And it was the best language at the time, however. And some of the famous projects that were written in assembly language were the Apollo missions that took the first human onto the moon. And that source code is actually still available online on GitHub. I'll post the link for you so you can see that. And it really obviously had a huge impact on the world, and it's very cool to see the original code that was written around that. After assembly language, a new language was invented by IBM called Fortran, and Fortran, or formula translation, again focused on math and science projects. Fortran was really good at helping programmers build much more complex applications. They were able to model weather, for example, or understand the dynamics of wind and fluids and oceans, for example. They were able to really use Fortran to model how our world worked and make predictions for the future. And Fortran had a major impact on the world, essentially, by bringing computers into real-world applications. Shortly after Fortran, COBOL was invented, which is really focused on transforming our businesses. COBOL was a business language that was more closely aligned with English, and it was geared for non-scientific applications, things such as banking and finance. And you'd be surprised to hear the majority of the banks in the world still use mainframes and COBOL programming to help process every transaction. So when you go to the ATM or the cash machine, most of that transactions still go through the COBOL programming model. So COBOL really transformed the world of banking and finance and provided a lot of innovation in the banking and finance space. The next phase of programming languages really began in 1980, 1990, 2000. This was about the time the internet became available to people at home. It was a time where the internet was driving new businesses and web pages were invented, and being able to do HTML was invented. And so businesses really started to make money on the internet and they started providing value through connected devices for the first time. The key languages during this time were C, C++, and primarily Java was the language of the internet at this time. And C, C++, still one of the most important languages in the world. It has probably been number one, number two, or number three in usage over the last 30 years. It remains to be a really powerful language. It's especially useful when you want to be a little bit close to the hardware, but you want some of the productivity improvements that a language can get. So you won't be surprised to know that C is used in most of the operating systems today. So Linux is written in C, Windows was written in C, what you use on your Mac OS is written in C. C is really good for these close to the hardware type environments. And so you'll also find it in embedded devices, small devices, for example, or small smart devices often use something like the C programming language. We also started to see some early games, like Doom was one of the first PC games that were available. It was written in C, and you saw some productivity products from Microsoft like Office, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Those were originally written in C, and you start to see really the birth of software that end users use, either through the internet or through their personal computer. The next language of this time remains one of the most popular languages of all time, and that's Java. And Java was really the language for the web, and became in great popularity in the 1990s and 2000s. And between Java and JavaScript has been the number one used language for the last 15 or so years, maybe 20 or more years around that. And some famous Java applications you'll start to recognize. Google was originally written in Java. Your Android phones are written in Java, and the applications for your apps are still written in Java. Netflix, Spotify, LinkedIn, Uber, Amazon, and TikTok are all written in Java. So obviously an incredibly important language that touches us all. So what's next? I don't know the future, but I see some interesting trends happening that are likely to be popular in the future. First, we see a lot of artificial intelligence, or AI, and I mentioned Python, but sometimes you can just talk to the computer, whether that's Alexa or Google Home or any of the popular home automation services where you speak your voice, translates it into English, and figures out what you want and then makes that happen. While I don't see that replacing true software development, that is how many people are going to interact with computers going forward, either through their phone or through their home assistant services. I think that will be really popular. I also see some no-code or low-code solutions becoming popular. And a lot of those are visual, where you drag and drop what you want, or you describe it in English language and not use programming languages at all. And you can really build a basic application fairly quickly that is productive and used by businesses. These are not just toys that are being used, or educational tools. That low code and no code I see as being really important. And as we talk about AI models and training are really how computers will evolve as we move forward. And that rather than giving new instructions to the computer by writing code, you'll train it on different models and different input characteristics so that it can learn and grow on its own. I think those are really interesting, and we'll have to see how those emerge. But certainly I don't expect those to replace true computer languages used by programmers. In fact, if we go all the way back to the beginning in the 1950s with things such as Fortran and COBOL, they are still active and out there and being used today. There are millions of lines of Fortran and COBOL still out there being enhanced and running today's core businesses. And so regardless of what language you pick, you can be assured it will last for a long time, and it will have a job or a role for you to be productive in, as far as we can see. So Selena, thank you so much for inviting me here to let me share my thoughts. I hope this was interesting for you. I'll share a few links for you with things that I use, such as the TIOBE index, which shows the most popular languages in use today. It's updated every month. And there's a YouTube video that shows from 1950 and today, which languages were important. You can see how that dynamic changes over time. And finally, I'll link the source code to GitHub for the assembly language version that took man to the moon back in the 1950s. So I hope you find those interesting, and I hope this was interesting for you. Thanks again, Selena. Bye.